Good morning. The time for convening has arrived. Senate will come to order. At this time, I will ask all unauthorized personnel to exit the chamber. Recognize the man from Noonan, Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Greetings and salutations from the city of Holmes. Mr. President, we got a great group of pages here today that are going to help us through our heavily debated day. Out of Jefferson, Georgia, we have Mackenzie Cartwright and Allie Newton. Out of Atlanta, we have Hal Birdsley. Out of the great city of Jackson, Georgia, we have Jackson Fritz. Out of Marietta, we have Elizabeth Hamilton and Annie Smith. Out of Decatur, we have Valeria Tiemann. Out of Williamson, Benjamin Venus. Out of Leesburg, we have Caroline Carberry and Serafina Whitaker Curtin. Y'all give these pages a big round of applause. Look forward to working with y'all today. Thank you for taking time out of school. I know that's a tough deal to do, but we appreciate your service to our state. Mr. President, did you get a badge from our forestry? You probably don't get those anymore, do you? Well, I got one, and I'm thankful for it. Mr. President, the journal has been read and found to be correct.
All right, Senator. Yeah, it is Forestry Day today, isn't it? So, well, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Pages, for being here. Glad to have you as always. Is there objection to dispensing of the reading of the journal? Chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First reading and references of Senate bills. Secretary?
Senate Bill 127 by Senator Bearden of the 30th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 13 of the
Regulated Industries.
Senate Bill 128 by Senator Estevez of the 35th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 6.
Education and Youth.
Senate Bill 129 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to property tax exemptions.
Finance.
Senate Bill 130 by Senator Hodges of the 3rd and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related
Health
to
and Human Services.
Senate Bill 131 by Senator Hodges of the 3rd and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 10 of Title 49 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to the Georgia Board of Health.
Regulated Industries.
Senate Bill 132 by Senator Strickland of the 42nd and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 6 of Chapter 7 of Title 17.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 133 by Senator Davenport of the 17th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to
Education and Youth.
Senate Bill 134 by Senator Sims of the 12th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated.
Education and Youth.
Senate Bill 135 by Senator James of the 28th. The bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 3 of Title 12 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to general provisions.
Natural Resources.
Senate Bill 136 by Senator James of the 28th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated related to health.
Regulated Industries.
Senate Bill 137 by Senator Dixon of the 45th. A bill to be entitled an act to amend an act to incorporate the city of Mulberry, approved February 13th.
State and local government.
Senate Bill 138 by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend
State and local government general.
Senate Bill 139 by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend an
State
act.
and local government general.
Senate Bill 140 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others. A bill to be entitled
Health and
an act.
Human Services.
Senate Resolution 148 by Senator Rhett of the 33rd and others. A resolution recognizing and commending Taiwan for its
Rules.
Senate Resolution 167 by Senator Kemp of the 38th and others, a resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to repeal the recognition of marriage as only the union of man and woman to provide for related
Judiciary.
matters. Mr. President, that completes the order.
First reading and references of House bills.
House Bill 157 by Representative Donahue of the 31st and others, a bill to be entitled
State and local government.
House Bill 236 by Representative Scoggins of the 14th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to abolish the office of elected county
State
surveyor.
and local government.
Mr. President, that completes the order.
Secretary will read reports of standing committee.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance has under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 52, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Hufstetler of the 52nd District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services has under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 72, due pass by committee substitute. Senate Bill 101, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 1st District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary has under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 68, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 69, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 42nd District, Chairman. Dear Mr. Secretary, pursuant to Rule 2-1.6, I hereby give notice that I will introduce a minority report to be read along with the majority report of Senate Bill 68, which was passed by Committee on Judiciary on Monday, February 10th, 2025. Sincerely, Senator Harold Jones II. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety has under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 76, due pass by committee substitute. Senate Bill 102, due pass by committee substitute. Senate Bill 99, due pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Governmental Operations Local has under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 70, due pass. Senate Bill 78, due pass. Senate Bill 83, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Dixon of the 45th District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Rules has under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 44, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Brass of the 6th District, Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Secretary will read resolutions for the second time.
Senate Bill 9 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others, Ensuring Accountability for Illegal AI Activities Act, enact. Senate Bill 10 by Senator Goodman of the 8th and others, Superior Courts of the Alapaha Judicial Circuit, additional judge provide. Senate Bill 12 by Senator Ginn of the 47th and others, Inspection of Public Records, Documents and Records in the possession of private persons or entities, revised provisions. Mr. President, that completes the order.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Recognize senators from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 10th, the 10th, and the 33rd.
Without objection, the senator from the 10th and the 33rd are excused. Recognize senator from the 51st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the great senator from the 8th, the Ag chairman.
Without objection, the senator from the 8th is excused. Recognize senator from the 40th.
Good morning, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 44th.
Without objection, the senator from the 44th is excused. Recognize the senator from the 38th.
Good morning, Mr. President. Ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 35th.
35th?
Yes, sir.
Without objection, the senator from the 35th is excused. Any other motions to excuse? Recognize the senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the senator from the 7th be excused. I think that's it. Thank you.
Without objection, the senator from the 7th is excused. Any other motions? Secretary will call the roll. Senators, signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary, unlock the machine. It is now time for a morning devotion. All senators, please take your seats and cease all conversation. I would ask that the doorkeeper secure the chamber at this time. I'd like to recognize a good senator from the bird dog capital of the state, isn't it? He will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance and introduce us to our chaplain of the day. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. If you'll join me in the pledge of the United States flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Georgia flag. Pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, and the principles which it stands, wisdom, justice, moderation, and courage. Thank you, colleagues. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have a special guest today and a special friend. I want to introduce you to a young man who has made a difference in my community, a difference in my hometown, a difference in my family. My son and his family attend Believers Church in Sylvania, Georgia, and we have with us today Reverend Clint Williams. Clint's a native of Johnson City, Tennessee, but he has deep roots in Bibb County and Jones County. And so he's a Georgia boy. He spent his summers here, and then, God led him to Sylvania 25 years ago. He is a graduate of East Tennessee State University, has a marketing degree there. He also is a graduate of Oral Roberts University with a master's in Christian education. He is the senior pastor at Believers Church in Sylvania. In addition to his pastoring duties at Believers Church, he served on the city council, city of Sylvania. He also serves as chaplain for our local police department, our local EMS, and our local fire. He's joined here today by his wife, Melanie, of 25 years. He has two daughters who are with us today, Emma and Mabel. Please help me welcome Reverend Clint Williams.
Thank you. Good morning. It is my honor to have a few minutes with you this morning, and I do want to thank Senator Burns and Lieutenant Governor for allowing me to do that, and I promise I will be within my 5 minutes. I want to tell you a quick story, and there's a story of when Jesus is talking to what of the day was the religious and educational know-it-alls, and I'm sure nobody within the Capitol knows anybody that thinks they know it all. There's not anybody here. Yeah, it just doesn't happen, does it? But Jesus tells them something that I think that we have in common. For you here serving the people, and for me serving in the church that I've been in for 25 years, I think our positions share this. In Luke 15, verse 2 of 3, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, and they were complaining that Jesus didn't hang around with the right people. And he even stooped so low as to have dinner with them. And then Jesus tells this story. He says, if a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Will he leave the 99 that he has and go out into the wilderness? And then he uses this phrase to go search for the one until he finds that one that is lost. See, Jesus goes after that one sheep. As a pastor, I'm often asked, why do I care about numbers? Or if you get a group of pastors together, the first question they always ask you is, how many members do you have? How big is your church? But I'm asked, why do I care about numbers? And I will stand before you today and honestly say that I do. I'm not ashamed of tracking numbers, keeping up with the numbers, and I do that because I care. See, most of what I know you guys do, no matter what side, on this side or over on the House side, a lot of what you do is about numbers. You even refer to each other by your numbers, what district you're from. You're concerned with the number of jobs, number of schools, number of teachers you need in your schools, how many law enforcement, first responders, we as a community, we as a state provide, and yes, even to the number of dollars that you may spend as legislators or that you may have to raise for your campaigns. Those numbers matter. And again, I'm not ashamed to tell you about that I am concerned with those numbers, not to be just a good steward of God's money and what God's given me, but I care about the numbers because just like Jesus did in that story, and I think the same is true for you ladies and gentlemen here, and that is the numbers matter because the one matters. I was told a long time ago by a mentor of mine that every number has a name, every name has a story, and every story matters to God. Now here you may be thinking I'm just talking about the people that you serve and the numbers, that one person in your district, in your area that you represent. But I also want to speak to you today, to encourage you today, that even you can sometimes feel lost, feel like nobody's paying attention. The right people aren't paying attention. That even in small little Sylvania and Scraven County, Georgia, you can feel lost and feel alone. But I can feel just as alone standing in the Capitol Rotunda with thousands of people around me that nobody sees. So I wanted to take my time this morning in just a minute and remind you and encourage you that this body's members, as you serve the people, on one side, remember that not one person is insignificant. That God went after the one to find them because he cares about each one of them. And he sent his son for each one of them. As public figures, it's normal for you to want your name, your number, your story to matter to people, to matter to the political world, to be before the governor, to be before our national representatives. I understand how important that is. But what I want to remind you of this morning, that as I have the honor of standing here before you, is that yes, you, each of your stories matters to God. That my prayer this morning, as I close, is that you remember that. That not only you remember the honor you have of standing and representing your people, but that all the work you do, I believe, as we serve people, literally puts a smile on God's face. And I want to encourage you that your work matters and your people matter. And I encourage you to keep serving and finding the one and representing the one that nobody else will speak for. And I thank you for giving me this time this morning. If you would you stand with me and we'll pray. Heavenly Father, it's my honor to stand before this great body this morning. And God, first and foremost, I ask you for their safety, that you lead, guide, and protect all of our elected officials from Governor Kemp all the way down. God, I ask you to give them wisdom as they seek to do their duties and serve the people of the state of Georgia. God, may they understand that what they do is serving people, that you sent your son for the people and you sent your son for them. God, give them wisdom and knowledge. Let mercy and grace wash over them. And today, God, we thank you for watching over us, that you would not only bless our country, but God, you would bless our state and each of the communities that are represented in front of me today. And we thank you for it now. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thank you.
If I could have everyone's attention, we always like to introduce our doctors of the day, and glad to have this young lady with us. And to introduce our doctor of the day, I will recognize the senator from the 41st to introduce our doctor of the day.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my great honor and privilege to introduce to you all, some of you already know her, but to introduce to many of you Dr. Anna Skold. Dr. Skold is a daughter of immigrants and a proud daughter of immigrants, and she works here in Georgia at Kaiser Permanente Medicine as the chief of palliative care for geriatrics here in Georgia. She also is an internist, is a board-certified internist, and works closely to create a team of folks who care well for some of the most fragile people that are in our hospitals. When she's not in the hospital working, she enjoys hiking and camping with her husband and her 2 children. And with that, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Anna Skold.
Thank you for having me. I'm here. If anybody needs me, please wash your hands. There's lots of flu, COVID, and RSV going around. And just to put one more thing into what I'd love for everybody to talk about at some point is please make sure everybody has a healthcare agent, somebody who can advocate for you if you were sick or needed somebody to speak for you. All right, thank you.
All right, good job. We have some special guests here today. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Resolution 76 by Senator Anderson of the 24th and others, a resolution congratulating Robert L. Strother, the 2023 to 2024 Georgia Logger of the Year, and for other purposes. Whereas Robert L. Strother was recently named the 2023 to 2024 Georgia Logger of the Year by the Georgia Forestry Association, GFA, and the Southeastern Wood Producers Association, SWPA, in recognition of his outstanding contributions to the forestry supply chain. And whereas a third-generation logger, Robert L. Strother, has upheld a family tradition that began with his grandfather in the 1930s, and he has further extended this legacy through his son, the 4th generation of Strothers in the logging industry. And whereas he currently leads the Strother Timber Company, and whereas as further testament to his dedication to the forestry community, he sponsors GFA's Northeast Georgia Regional Forestry Meeting, participates in local GFA and SWPA activities, and regularly hosts University of Georgia Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources students for tours of his harvesting operations. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body congratulate Robert L. Strother upon being named the 2023 to 2024 Georgia Logger of the Year, and extend the most sincere best wishes for continued success. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I want to recognize the senator from the 24th to introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Mr. President. It gives me great honor to present to you the Logger of the Year. He is a gentleman from Wilkes County, Washington, Georgia. He's in my district. 3 generations been in the logging industry. Everybody knows how important forestry is in the state of Georgia. I'm here to tell you that he's been elected amongst his peers to be the Logger of the Year, and also that he and all the other loggers understand what we just went through with Helene. He has helped a lot of farmers, a lot of track owners try to recoup what damaged timber they have had from Helene. But it gives me great honor to present to you the Log of the Year, Mr. Rob, Big Rob. Come on up here.
Thank you. Give him a word. I want to appreciate y'all having me here today. It's an honor to be recognized at the Capitol today. A real big honor. Thank y'all.
And before I mess up, he brought his other 2/3 with him too, Miss Jenny. She upgrades him tremendously.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Congrats. It is Farm Bureau Day today, and we always like all our partners from around the state to come down and tell us what's going on in their parts of the state and the world and everything. And we just greatly appreciate them. And I know Senator from the 8th has a resolution. Secretary, read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 117 by Senator Goodman of the 8th and others, a resolution recognizing February 11th, 2025 as Georgia Farm Bureau Federation Day at the state capitol and for other purposes. Whereas the Georgia Farm Bureau Federation was formed in 1937 as a voice for production agriculture and legislative affairs, and whereas from its humble beginnings in northwest Georgia, the Georgia Farm Bureau Federation has grown to 158 county chapters with a current membership of more than 235,000, led by volunteer farmer members, and whereas the Georgia Farm Bureau Federation now operates companies that provide services to its members in areas that include insurance, advocacy, and banking. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate, the members of this body recognize February 11th, 2025 as Georgia Farm Bureau Federation Day at the state capitol. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Is there objections to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. It's good to see our good friend Tom McCall once again leading Georgia Farm Bureau in another outstanding year and all the different endeavors that they're involved with. We appreciate Tom's leadership and his team that he's assembled around him. To speak to the resolution, recognize the senator from the 8th, the Ag Commission Chairman.
Appreciate the promotion, Mr. President. Well, it's Farm Bureau Day at the Capitol, and I'm proud to be here to introduce some great friends of mine. Tom McCall, who of course was formerly the House Ag Chairman, has been a mentor to me for a long time and a great friend. He's my fraternity brother as well. And also Daniel Johnson, who's first Vice President, who is my constituent and has been my friend long before I was ever involved in the legislature. So if y'all see him, tell him I'm working hard. 235,000 members across the state, Farm Bureau is, and you add, that's family, so you're talking about probably well over 1 million people. Great organization. I'm past president of my county Farm Bureau. I missed a meeting one time, and when I came back, they voted me as president. I tried not to miss a meeting again, Mr. Tom, but at any rate, glad you're here. Thankful for what you do for our industry. Thank you for all the advocacy work you do on behalf of this state's farm families. And Mr. Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. Thank you to all these chairmen up here with us. Daniel Johnson is South Georgia Vice President. Mr. Ralph Caldwell from over in Heard County is your Middle Georgia Vice President. We have members in each and every one of y'all's district. We have 158 county offices statewide and around 200 and, like Russ said, 35,000 member families. So I tell everybody that worries about a vote, that rolled into close to 750,000 votes at some point. But thank y'all for what you do for the largest industry in the state, which is agriculture. Also, y'all have members here today. We have about 600 people. I'm on behalf of them inviting y'all to lunch down at the depot. If you want to come, you have people there from wherever you from. But again, thank y'all for what you do on behalf of agriculture. Thank you on behalf of what you do for farmers. There's a little hurricane bill coming to y'all with some funding. Our people down southeast Georgia were devastated. Our insurance company has taken care of what we're supposed to down there. But any help y'all can give to those farmers that lost everything, we appreciate it. So thank y'all again for what you do. Good to see you. And again, come eat lunch. Thank you.
Are there any unanimous consents? Does anyone wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Recognize the senator from the 12th for a point of personal privilege. She must be stepped off the line, so. Is the senator from the 43rd, would you like to be recognized? Senator from the 43rd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I want to recognize a group of leaders and aspiring leaders and great leaders Leadership Rockdale class is in the balcony. Please welcome them to their state capitol. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Recognize the senator from the 12th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under the leadership of CEO Scott Steiner, Phoebe Putney Health Systems is the largest employer in Southwest Georgia and is one of the state's leading providers of comprehensive medical care, ensuring the people of Southwest Georgia have access to advanced care close to home. On January 15th, 2025, Phoebe opened its new trauma and critical care tower. The $150 million investment houses a vastly expanded emergency and trauma center, just the second level 2 trauma center in Georgia that's south of Atlanta, a new neonatal intensive care unit that is more than 4 times the size of the previous NICU, and a new surgical intensive care unit that added 20 beds to Phoebe's critical care capabilities, all without state dollars. Phoebe has also become a state, regional, and national leader in healthcare workforce development. In August of 2024, the Phoebe Living and Learning Community opened on Phoebe's main campus. This bold and innovative partnership with Albany Technical College serves as the new home of the college's nursing, practical nursing, nurse aid, and phlebotomy programs, and includes 80 apartments for students so they can live where they learn and train. Phoebe's investments will help Albany Technical College quadruple its number of nurse graduates, addressing the nursing shortages that are found in our economy in Southwest Georgia. Today, we honor and recognize CEO Scott Steiner for his important contributions, his leadership to the health and well-being of the people of Southwest Georgia, the vital role he plays in the region's economic development, and commitment to the Phoebe Way, which is a pledge to make every life they touch better by putting safety first, offering superior service, and providing exceptional care to everyone and every day. And if our CEO is in the balcony, I would like for him to stand. And if not, wherever you are in this building, Scott, because I know you're here today, thank you so very much for your leadership. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Recognize the senator from the 14th.
I'm great. I'm great. Good morning, colleagues. I am the senator from the 14th, and this is Trump Morning News. Trump Morning News, your number one leader in Trump news entertainment, keeping you apprised of the health of your democracy. Today in Trump Morning News, we are coming off of a week of federal court orders from around the country in which the new administration's priorities have clashed head-on with federal statutes and other sources of constitutional authority. No fewer than 5 federal courts across the country have put a temporary stay on some of President Trump's core agenda. That includes getting rid of birthright citizenship, which is a constitutional guarantee under the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, a reduction in National Institutes of Health funding to universities and researchers across the country, putting all USAID workers on leave, a buyout for federal workers, which was an offer that they should leave now so that they get paid through September, and letting Elon Musk and his crack team of teenagers get sensitive Treasury records at the U.S. Treasury Department that include the entire country's social security numbers. Most recently, January 31st, a Rhode Island federal court issued a temporary stay of Trump's sweeping federal freeze. Yesterday, on Monday, that same federal court in Rhode Island re-upped its order saying that the government was illegally continuing to freeze funds in contravention of the January 31st order. To repeat, that means that the federal court's order was not being followed over a week later, and the court considered criminal sanctions. Of course, it violates the Impoundment Act, which we've discussed before, that you must ask Congress to change appropriations of funds. In response to these court rulings, there are several reactions from the Trump administration. Stephen Miller referred to a lone unelected judge in Rhode Island making decisions on behalf of the entire executive. Vance, the vice president, referred to how some actions by judges are illegal and that, quote, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. And Elon Musk, who has changed his X profile to the name Harry Bowles, commented that democracy in America is being destroyed by judicial coup and that activist judges are not real judges. Here for critical commentary on today's news is our special guest, the senator from the 14th. Senator from the 14th. Well, folks, we are off to the races. We have teed up the fight. And the fight is going to be that the federal government, through Elon Musk, is going to do whatever they want. And federal judges are going to say, no, you can't do that, that's illegal. And what do you think is going to happen next? Ask yourself where this goes. This goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is probably going to side with all the federal judges who say that everything that's happening is illegal. And then what will happen? J.D. Vance, on the presidential trail, said that the president should stand in front of the country like Andrew Jackson and say, let the Supreme Court Chief Justice enforce his own orders. This theory of the unitary executive has gone way too far. It is now essentially a fight between the branches and what some law professors are calling a constitutional crisis, including noted luminaries Erwin Chemerinsky from Berkeley and Lawrence Tribe from Harvard. Now, you'll find voices that will say anything that their team tells them to say. But the American Bar Association has also released a statement saying that the rule of law itself is under threat and urging lawyers everywhere to remember their professional responsibilities. We are not yet at the point where democracy is failing, but the signs are in the air, folks. All of us, not just members of the bar, are aware of it. But let me tell you something. I understand that democracy doesn't always poll so well. And today's Farm Bureau Day at the Capitol. So let's talk about Georgia and let's talk about USAID. In South Georgia, there's a company called Manna, M-A-N-A. Mark Moore is the co-founder and CEO. GPB did this reporting in Fitzgerald, Georgia. They're a nonprofit that makes a children's survival mixture from milk and peanuts known as RUTF, or ready-to-use therapeutic food. They manufacture enough packets of that paste to feed 2 million children per year, and guess who pays for it? USAID. They buy it from South Georgia and they send it to malnourished kids around the world. In 2022, the governor of this state, Brian Kemp, said, "We are excited to watch Manna Nutrition serve communities in need worldwide with products from our state's #1 agriculture industry. We've been laser focused on creating impactful opportunities across the state, and jobs like these will be good for the local community for years to come." Manna, South Georgia peanut farmers, do not know what their future looks like. Here's the exact quote from the CEO of Manna. "We're not discouraged yet," he said. "We're going to keep going, and finding a way forward is too important to just sit around and sort of indulge in feeling sorry for ourselves. We're going to get it done." Well, that's all the time we have this morning for Trump Morning News. As always, we remind you, your state legislators, you can't do anything directly about this, and there's nothing the Republican Party could have done in the last 20 years to prevent this from happening. Thank you for your time, colleagues. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator, I'm sorry I missed your ending, but I missed the ending. I'm sorry I missed that. Oh, okay, all right. You and I, after this is over with, we're going down to CNN. We're gonna get you a spot on CNN. You're much better than any of those guys I got on TV right now. I recognize the senator from the 39th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise today on a point of personal privilege to acknowledge Women in Blue Day and the Georgia Federation of Democratic Women. These dedicated women represent a legacy of civic engagement, leadership, and service in communities across our state. And we've got several members in the gallery with us today. Thank you, ladies. Your presence here today is a reminder that progress is made when women lead, when we fight for justice, and when we lift as we climb. Thank you for your service and your dedication to the people of Georgia. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Recognize the senator from the 34th for a point of personal privilege.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I would like to do a personal privilege to the Fed Chamber of Commerce Leadership Fed Program Government Day of Class 2025. And we have them in the chambers today. If you could stand and be recognized. Thank you all for your dedication to the Fayetteville. Thank you all. I yield the well.
Recognize the senator from the 20th. Recognize the senator from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Caught me napping back there. I just want to recognize the peri-adult leadership group that's here with us at the Capitol today, future leaders of our community, and I'm proud to have them with us. I would like them to please stand if they're still in the gallery and be recognized. Thank you all for being here. Have a great day.
Recognize the senator from the 1st.
Good morning, Mr. President. You know, Referring to CNN and the senator from the 14th, don't we often say that democracy is messy? Got an amen on that one. Amen. So from a perspective of why I'm here today is to discuss the Senior Week at the Capitol. That's February 10th through the 14th, and Senior Day is February 11th. So the Georgia Council on Aging was created in 1977 by this legislature, serve as an advisory capacity on aging issues to the Governor, General Assembly, Department of Human Services, and all other state agencies. COAG, which is a coalition of advocates for Georgia's elderly, is also a part of the Georgia Council on Aging. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 15% of Georgia's population is 65 and above, and that number continues to grow, and it's estimated that by 2030, 20% of Georgia's population will be over 60. In my practice as primary care, I see mostly geriatric patients, and I certainly appreciate these numbers and the growing population that we have. So each year, through the governor's proclamation and messages like this, we honor our seniors and thank them for what they have contributed and continue to contribute to the vitality of our state. Thank you.
Recognize the senator from the 41st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Every February, we celebrate Black History Month to honor the contributions and legacy of African Americans in the United States, and especially here in Georgia. But as we travel through this month, I thought it was important not only to acknowledge the people who have transformed Georgia's history, but also the places long forgotten that are symbols of Black history around our state. One of the places that I want to acknowledge today is Camp Gordon, located about 12 miles northeast of Atlanta, and it's now the site of the DeKalb Peachtree Airport. Camp Gordon was a summer training camp that transformed overnight into a full-scale military installation used during World War I and World War II in Georgia. It also happened to be one of the very first camps in the country that opened its doors to Black troops. As World War I broke out, the U.S. Army was still segregated, and Black soldiers were prohibited from serving alongside their white counterparts, and they were usually made to train in separate facilities from their white troops. But African American men saw that the war was an opportunity to finally gain respect and social standing as they began to fight this war. Unfortunately, racism and prejudice and discrimination, it ran rampant across the country. But Camp Gordon was this tiny little step towards proving that Black and white men could exist together without friction. Today, I honor those 9,000 soldiers out of approximately 400,000 American soldiers, African American soldiers who served in World War I. I honor those 9,000 that were sent to Camp Gordon for training alongside their white counterparts. Even though they faced segregation within the walls, they got their foot in the door, and they became a part of history, a history of small but vastly far-reaching change that helped lead us to desegregation. Places like Camp Gordon are all around us, and they remind us of our past, that though change comes ever so slowly, change does come. It comes in every tiny step that we take to resist injustice. It comes in every form seemingly insignificant, like acts of opening the gates to Black soldiers in the face of unbelievable opposition. With that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 42nd. Don't see him. Senator from the 18th.
Good morning, colleagues. It's great to see everybody and those that are in the gallery with us. You know, if like me, you noticed the Capitol had a nice, fresh, kind of extra smell as you came in today, a little different than what you usually walk in the morning. And I don't know about you, but it smelled to me like the smell of fresh-cut Georgia pine. And that comes to us via hard-working Georgians. Can only mean one thing. It's Forestry Day at the Capitol, and if you'll look on your desk, you should see a nice gift from the Georgia Forestry folks. You'll see a wooden badge on the table on the desk in front of you, as well as a nice coaster. You know, I'm honored this morning to recognize the men and women across our forestry industry and across this great state of ours. With roughly 22 million acres of commercially available private timberland and over 140,000 jobs in the forestry industry, you don't have to look far to understand why Georgia is number one in the forestry industry for our whole nation. Like I said, you've got a nice little gift from them, so join me in recognizing these incredible men and women, and they want to extend a personal invitation to you to come see them at the Freight Depot this afternoon at 5 o'clock. Mr. President, I've got one other announcement, and that is that the State Bar of Georgia's YLD Leadership Academy. Do we have any of those folks in the gallery? I know that they may be trying to make their way to the chamber, but there's 30 young lawyers that are crawling around the Capitol that came here today from across the state. They're engaged in a learning process and classes that involve 6 sessions during the course of the year. They tour the state to learn more about service, learn more about leadership, and learn more about a lawyer's community involvement and how they can improve their community. So I'm going to thank them and honor them today for their service and for what they will do in the future. And lastly, on a personal note, that group is led by somebody dear to me, James Banter. Y'all have met James before, but James is a very close friend and one of my law partners from our firm in Macon. So welcome to James and all the YLD Leadership Academy folks that are here at the Capitol. With that, Mr. President, thanks. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise today to talk about something that affects all of us and everyone that we represent, which is our financial health and security. Recently, Trump administration official, OPM head Russell Vought, is moving ahead to shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB. This move is being framed as an effort to limit government overreach, but in reality, it is a direct attack on regular Americans while giving even more power to the wealthy elite, big banks, and corporations. I want to walk through a little bit of history. CFPB was created to protect Americans from financial predators and fraudsters after 2008, when we experienced the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Big banks and Wall Street firms, with too little oversight, engaged in reckless behavior, issuing risky subprime mortgages, creating complex financial products that few understood, and putting profit ahead of responsibility. What was the result? The housing market collapsed. The stock market plunged, and millions of Americans lost their homes, their jobs, and their life savings. While working Americans suffered, the federal government rushed in, not to save struggling families, but to bail out the very banks that caused the crisis. The government poured $800 billion into Wall Street, while ordinary people were left to pick up the pieces. From 2007 to 2010, the median wealth of American families plummeted nearly 40%, wiping out years and decades of economic progress for regular Americans. Home ownership rates, a key source of middle-class wealth, collapsed, and many families were pushed into foreclosure. The average American family did not recover its pre-2008 wealth levels until 2020, more than a decade later. In stark contrast to that pain felt by the average American, let's look at what happened on Wall Street. The stock market rebounded quickly. By 2013, corporate profits were soaring again. And by 2021, the richest 10% of Americans who own 89% of US stocks had seen their wealth explode. But nearly half of Americans don't own any stocks, so they saw no benefit from that. In the wake of that disaster, where regular Americans were pillaged and big banks were bailed out, Elizabeth Warren led the establishment of the CFPB to ensure that banks, lenders, and credit card companies couldn't take advantage of consumers again. Since then, CFPB has returned $20 billion to the government. It has returned $20 billion to the government from people engaging in illegal practices like predatory lending, hidden fees, and financial scams. It protects regular Americans, not corporate profits. But now, Vogt and his allies want to dismantle it, claiming it's unnecessary. But who benefits from shutting it down? Not working families, who will be more vulnerable to financial scams and abusive practices. Not small businesses, who rely on fair lending practices. Not even the government, which now won't be able to collect additional billions back to the taxpayers. The winners will be big banks and corporations, free to operate without consequences, just like before the 2008 crash. Under the guise of saving money, the Trump administration is telling the cops to take off their uniforms and go home. You can be assured that without law enforcement, bad actors will behave badly, leaving many victims to fend for themselves. We don't even need history to instruct us here. We don't need oligarchs running our government to win, and to win big with huge payouts at our expense and your expense. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
A senator from the 42nd has his light on, but I hadn't seen him in the chamber, so. Does any other senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? You have before you a consent calendar of privileged resolutions. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? Chair hears none. The resolution on the consent calendars is adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? You have before you a consent calendar of local bills. Mr. Secretary, have any objections been filed for any of these local bills?
Mr. President, there are no objections.
Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the Committee on State and Local Government Operations, which is favorable to the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Questions on the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar? All those in favor will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. All on the passage of the consent calendar, yeas are 49, the nays are 0. Moving on. These bills, having received the requisite constitutional majority, therefore pass. Recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent that one roll call vote. I move that the appointments. Let me start over. My colleague over here came over here and took my cards away from me. I got this.
Take your time, Senator. Take your
Mr.
time.
President, I ask for unanimous consent that one roll call vote suffice for the confirmation of the appointments to the Judicial Qualifications Commission.
It is now time to consider the confirmation of the appointments. Secretary read the resolution.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Assignments has had under consideration the following appointments to the Judicial Qualifications Commission. Mr. James L. Coursey, appointed by the Speaker of the House. Honorable Brian M. Rickman, appointed by the Supreme Court. The committee has also had under consideration the following appointments to the Judicial Legal Defense Fund Commission. Mr. Brad Vaughn, appointed by the Lieutenant Governor. Honorable Todd Markle, appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The committee has also had under consideration the appointments made by the Governor, which require Senate confirmation and were submitted to the Senate on January 31st, 2025, and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation: that the appointments be confirmed as submitted. Respectfully submitted, Honorable Burt Jones, Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
All right, the majority leader has moved that instead of voting on these individually, that we vote on them as a block. The senator from the 53rd has objected to that motion. So, Senator Majority Leader, would you like to speak to your motion? Senator from the 53rd, would you like to speak to your motion? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I ask is this body reserve a separate vote for Mr. James Coursey, and then we can have a vote for the others all together. I just want to separate that one out. Is there any questions? I'm happy to answer.
You have no questions, Senator. The senator has stated his case. He's objected to the motion by the majority leader. All those in favor of the majority leader's motion? Ready? All those in favor of the majority leader's motion will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 53rd, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make a motion that we separate Mr. James Coursey from the vote.
I think you've made that motion, Senator, and we're voting on it right now. On the motion, the yeas are 46 and the nays are 5, and this motion has prevailed. It is now time to consider the underlining JQC vote. Recognize the majority leader for another motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the appointments to the Judicial Qualifications Commission be confirmed as submitted.
The majority leader has moved. Is there any objection? We do have an objection. Would you like to speak to your motion? Would you like to speak to your objection, Senator? You can do it from the floor.
Mr. President, I have no intention of wasting the Senate's time. I just want to make a separate vote on James Coursey. That's all.
Senators yielded well. The majority leader has moved. There is objection, so now the vote here will be on the majority leader's motion. All those in favor of the majority leader's motion, vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the confirmation of the appointments of Mr. James Coursey and the Honorable Brian M. Rickman to the Judicial Qualifications Commissions, the yeas are 51, the nays are 1. The appointments are therefore confirmed. Recognize the majority leader for another motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent that one roll call vote suffice for the confirmation of the appointments to the Judicial Legal Defense Fund Commission.
The majority leader has moved that we have one roll call vote. Is there objection? Without objection? We do have somebody on there, Senator. You're right. Would you like to object to that, Senator? You good? Okay. Recognize the Senator from the 14th. What purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, I'm just curious, is there any member of your staff that wants a picture of a recorded vote that would require us to put a roll call vote up on the board for maybe his office? Or
I think, as much as a lot of you guys come in there to ask him questions, I think he would like to know who his friends and foes are here.
Well, it's much easier to hang up a picture, Mr. President, I think, than it is a video of a unanimous consent. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Without objection, We'll do one roll call vote. All those in favor of the majority leader's motion, go ahead and make the motion, Senator.
Mr. President, I move that the appointments to the Judicial Legal Defense Fund Commission be confirmed as submitted.
Majority leader has moved. Any objection? Without objection, they are confirmed. But we will take the roll call vote. All those in favor of the motion, vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the confirmation of, in particular, Mr. Brad Vaughn, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0, and he is confirmed. Recognize the majority leader for another motion.
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the names of the governor's appointments.
The majority leader has moved that we dispense of the reading of the governor's appointments. Is there any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent that one roll call vote suffice for the confirmation of the governor's appointments.
Is there objection? Without objection, all those in favor of one more.
Mr. President, I move that the governor's appointments be confirmed as submitted.
The majority leader has moved. All those in favor will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the confirmation of the governor's appointees, the yeas are 47, the nays are 2, and the governor's appointments are therefore confirmed. Moving on to the rules calendar. Senate Bill 84. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 84 by Senator Albers of the 56 and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 40-2-86 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to special license plates promoting or supporting certain worthy agencies, funds, and or nonpartisan corporations with proceeds dispersed to general fund and the agency fund or nonprofit corporation so as to establish a specialty license plate honoring the Shepherd Center, to establish a specialty license plate benefiting the Georgia Transplant Foundation, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to provide for compliance with constitutional requirements, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 84, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 40-2-86 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to special license plates promoting or supporting certain worthy agencies, funds, or nonprofit corporations with proceeds dispersed to the general fund and the agency, fund, or nonprofit corporation so as to establish a specialty license plate honoring the Shepherd Center, to establish a specialty license plate benefiting the Georgia Transplant Foundation, to provide for related matters, to provide for effective dates, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the Chairman of Public Safety, Senator from 56.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 84 will provide great value to two tremendous organizations in this state, creating specialty license plates for the Shepherd Center and Georgia Transplant Foundation. The Shepherd Center, which is a real treasure, was founded in Atlanta on August 18, 1975, with 152 beds and growing. They're going to celebrate their 50th anniversary this summer. They treat over 800 inpatient and 8,000 outpatient annually, treating spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, stroke, MS, chronic pain, and other neuromuscular conditions. They are nationally ranked in the top 10 for an injury hospital, and they are treating patients from every single county in the state of Georgia. They provide complimentary on-campus family housing for those that live more than 60 miles away. The Shepherd Center is a non-for-profit hospital, and the proceeds generated from this license plate will further benefit their mission to restore hope, independence, dignity for those who experience temporary or permanent disability by injury or disease. Next is a Donate Life license plate to benefit the Georgia Transplant Foundation, founded in 1992 by Tommy Smith, a veteran of the Vietnam War who needed a kidney transplant. The foundation is a non-for-profit organization, provides emotional, financial, and educational assistance for those awaiting a transplant or going through the transplant process. Annually, they donate $2.4 million in financial assistance, including but not limited to emergency services, medication, pre-transplant, and insurance assistance. Over 21,000 individuals have been helped, with over 2,000 receiving assistance each and every year. It's important to note that this costs the state no money at all. The additional dollars collected over and above will go to these two respective foundations. As many of you know, the Georgia Transplant Foundation is very important to me and my family, as a few years ago when I donated a kidney to my son, Will. So today, while a license plate bill might not seem like the most important thing that happens, it's an opportunity for us to support two great organizations, and the exposure will have more people be aware of being an organ donor, know what it's like to be an organ recipient, and those who might struggle and need assistance from the Shepherd Center. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I will yield the well.
You do have a question? Is that a question, Senator? You wish to speak in the well? You have a question?
I have a question. Senator, do you yield?
I yield.
Isn't it true that though the Shepherd Center is located in District 39, it is the preeminent place in this country where families find hope from spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, stroke, and other neurological conditions, and where cutting-edge rehabilitation meets compassionate care, and where patients defy the odds every single day?
Senator, you couldn't have said it better, and thank you for your extraordinary representation of the Shepherd Center.
You have no further questions, Senator.
Thank you. I'd urge your favorable consideration.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Good job, Senator. I don't think you can put a value on what the Shepherd Center means to the city and this state. The work they do is really remarkable, and we're proud to have them right here in Atlanta, Georgia. So thank you for doing that, Senator. Appreciate your good work on that. Moving on to Senate Bill 39. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 39 by Senator Tillery, the 19th, and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 18 of Title 45, Chapter 4 of Title 49, and Chapter 1 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, related to employees' insurance and benefits plans, public assistance, and general provisions relative to state government, respectively, so as to prohibit coverage of expenses for gender-affirming care under the state health benefit plan or with any state funds, to provide for definitions, to provide for limited exceptions, to provide state healthcare facilities and healthcare providers employed by the state from providing gender-affirming care, to provide for related matters, to provide for legislative findings, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Walker, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 39, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 18 of Title 45, Chapter 4 of Title 19, and Chapter 1 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, related to the employees' insurance and benefits plans, public assistance, and general provisions relative to state government, respectively, so as to prohibit coverage and expenses for gender-affirming care under the state health benefit plan or with any state funds and for other purposes. Mr. President, the minority report to Senate Bill 39 has been attached. Mr. President, Senator Bratz of the 6th offers the following amendment number 1, to amend the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor substitute to Senate Bill 39 by inserting before to provide for related matters on line 7 the following, to amend Chapter 5 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to Department of Administrative Services so as to prohibit the department or any state agency from awarding or entering into contracts solicited pursuant to requests for proposals that include consideration of transgender issues as an evaluation factor or criterion and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Jackson of the 41st and others offers the following amendment number 2, to amend the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor substitute to Senate Bill 39 by inserting after such individual's sex on line 47 the following, such term does not include mental health treatments for gender dysphoria. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the Senator from the 19th. Speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, Senate Bill 39 is 5 pages long, which may seem, I guess it's not the longest bill we've had this session. It won't be the longest bill, but it's actually a lot more simple than that to explain. Senate Bill 39, in no uncertain terms, makes clear that you cannot use state taxpayer dollars in any form for transgender surgeries. That is the simplicity of it. That is the complexity of it. That is the entire bill. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
You do have a couple questions, Senator. Recognize the Senator from the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the Senator yield?
Certainly.
Senator, I just have a simple question. Would this set a precedent for the General Assembly to find other issues or other diseases that they wish not to pay for example? Would it then be under the purview of the General Assembly to say the majority decided they don't like asthma, that we would pass a bill that would restrict the state health benefit plan from paying for asthma-related treatments and medications? Is that the precedent this bill sets, Senator?
Well, I don't think it's the precedent this bill sets, because the precedent would have been set much earlier when we already banned state funds for being used for abortion. It also has already been set with the fact that we don't allow the state health benefit plan to pay in the past for bariatric surgeries. We also don't allow Medicaid to pay for Viagra. So if the precedent has already been set, it was set well forward today.
Recognize the Senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have is, do you believe that gender dysphoria is a medical diagnosis?
So I believe that our body in Senate Bill 140 already decided that we do not think state taxpayer dollars should be used for transgender surgeries on minors.
But do you
and
think...
if,
Okay. Is it your position that gender dysphoria is or is not a medical condition?
Well, the great thing about it is that my position doesn't matter for this body. What matters is what 29 votes decide at the end, and then what 91 votes are going to decide across the hall. I think our body, though, has already decided that we do not think that state taxpayer dollars should be used for transgender surgeries on minors. And all this says is, hey, looks like there was a possible loophole there. The loophole where that transgender surgery was being paid for with our state dollars out of state, and we're going to close that in this process.
On line 84, it calls gender dysphoria a medical condition. Do you dispute the language that you put in this bill?
Let's read all of line 80. Let's go before line 84. The board shall adopt rules and regulations regarding the exclusions and expenses for gender-affirming care, which shall contain limited exceptions for. And the limited exception you said there is treatments for medical conditions other than gender dysphoria. So
Right,
in this
so-
instance, if you're going to say, I think that the rulings, I'm not going to dispute the rulings of the courts on what they may say if gender dysphoria is medical or not, but I also don't think that that means that the state health benefit plan has to cover those in the same ways that we don't have to cover other procedures that we've mentioned already.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. If you'll yield for two more questions. So essentially, you're conceding that courts have said that gender dysphoria is a medical condition, and in fact, that is the language on line 84. So you are basically saying that is how it stands, and sometimes that has been deemed medically necessary, but we're going to pick this among other things, any other condition that might be deemed medically necessary by a doctor, and say this we're not going to cover.
Well, what we're saying is that state taxpayer dollars are not going to cover them. If you want to cover them with your own private plans, if you want to cover them with your own cash, we're not outlawing that at all. We're just saying a position that I think is the position of the majority of Georgians, that state taxpayer dollars are not going to be used for transgender surgeries.
But you do concede, and in fact, it does say that it is a medical condition.
I'm not going to dispute your reading of line 84.
Thank you.
Recognize Senator from 38th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
One thing that stood out to me in this bill is line 13. It said the General Assembly finds, and it says radical gender ideology. I was curious to know who defined radical gender ideology.
Well, in this bill, I think radical gender ideology, we defined part of it. Let's go back through our history of this. And I know you weren't here when this bill passed, so I can't cite you to your vote on that issue. But I think the General Assembly found in Senate Bill 140 2 years ago that allowing transgender surgeries on minors was radical. I think that this next step forward closes the loophole of allowing those to occur out of state. So, Senator, if you're asking my personal opinion, do I think transgender surgeries, particularly on minors, is radical? Yes, sir, I do. And I think the majority of Georgians support me on that.
So does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir.
So is it defined somewhere in code what radical is?
I don't know. I can look through the rest of the code for you and see if we can define radical.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Recognize Senator from the 1st.
Does the gentleman yield?
Sure.
In following up, if you can help me understand the 81 through 83 were the exceptions. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
And then lines 84 through 91 were the ones that it does treat, including, let's name a few there, verifiable disorder of sexual development, individuals with ambiguous genitalia, chromosomal abnormalities resulting in ambiguity. So in other words, you're talking about children going into adulthood with chromosomal abnormalities or mutations basically in XXY, producing XXY or XYY chromosomal. Those are the basics relating to that. Or with ambiguous genitalia from mutations relating to that. Those are the genetics. We are not talking about that. We are excluding that, and that does allow continued treatment relating to that.
Correct. If the chromosomal abnormalities, sorry, that's a mouthful, those would still be covered under plans. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if there are no further questions, then I'll yield the well.
You do have one other question, Senator, but you're free to yield the well at any time.
Sure, I'll take the last question.
Senator from the 41st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, do you yield?
Sure.
Thank you. So you keep referring to making sure that minors are not able to access gender-affirming care. But isn't it true that this bill applies to anyone who is covered by the state health plan, including adults?
Yeah, let me rephrase that. As we were talking about, I think the comments from the Senator from the 38th asking about radical, Senator from the 44th on where our policy was before, setting out where the policy has been. I think I did need to talk about Senate Bill 140 and the fact that it did move to ban transgender surgeries on minors. This bill does take a step further. What it says is we're not going to spend state taxpayer dollars on these surgeries. And let's talk about why. The reason we had to say state taxpayer dollars now is because what has happened through judicial rule, settlements, or otherwise, we've said, hey, while the General Assembly has spoken and spoken clearly and said loudly, we do not think that these surgeries should occur in our state, there's a back door that's happened here. The back door that's happened is through settlements, court decisions, otherwise. We are paying for those surgeries. And we are allowing those surgeries on minors. And we're not just allowing those surgeries on Georgia minors, we're paying for those surgeries on Georgia minors. Transgender surgeries on Georgia minors paid for with Georgia taxpayer dollars, but since we've banned them in Georgia, guess where we pay for them at? Out of state. It's adding insult to injury to the policy that's already been created by this body and the policy that's already been passed by this body.
Senator, do you further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Does this bill apply to adults who are seeking gender-affirming care?
If they are using state taxpayer dollars to do so, yes, ma'am. If they are not using state taxpayer dollars to do so, no, ma'am.
And sir, has this body made a declarative statement that we don't believe that adults should have access to transgender care? Can you tell me a bill or at any point where we've said collectively that when it comes to adults receiving trans care, that they should not be allowed to get that in the state of Georgia?
No, ma'am. I don't think we've said that. But what I do think this bill says, doesn't say if you're an adult you can't have transgender care. It says if you're an adult, you can't use state taxpayer dollars to have transgender surgeries.
One further question, if you would further yield.
Yes, ma'am.
And also you continue to refer to surgeries, but based on your definition, does transgender or gender-affirming care, it also includes hormonal therapies as well? So we're not just talking about restrictions on surgeries, but isn't it true we're also talking about access to medication that a state employee may have been taking for the last 20 years of their life as they have been transitioning? Isn't that true?
We're talking about transgender care, correct.
You have no further questions, Senator.
Members of the Senate, thank you for your time today. I ask your favorable
I'm sorry.
consideration, and I'll yield the well.
Senator, I'm
Senator
sorry.
from 36?
I thought you had your light on wanting to come to the front, Senator. I apologize.
Thank you. Yes, I just returned to the floor. Thank you, and to the senator, the author of the bill. Doesn't this constitute a violation of equal protection? We have a massive number of people and families across this state, isn't it true, that are insured on our state health insurance policy. What on earth empowers us to go in the middle of a year when we've already signed up for our insurance and dictate that certain procedures are no longer going to be covered for adults with transgender issues? What on earth?
Right. Well,
puts us in the doctor's office, quite frankly. That's what this bill does, isn't it true?
I do not think that's true, Senator, but I do want to answer your questions that you asked. You asked about equal protection, and then you asked about middle of the plan year. First of all, this does not change anything in the middle of a plan year. What it does say is when the state goes through its open enrollment period, we're making clear to all state employees that we're not going to use state taxpayer dollars to pay for this gender-affirming care and transgender surgeries any longer. Further, on the equal protection argument, I think the courts are going to decide that. We've asked them not to lay into legislation. I don't know if it's fair for me then to weigh into a court decision. But if you're asking about equal protection will be violated if we allowed this for one group and not for the other. But we're just categorically saying, hey, we're not going to pay for this care with state taxpayer dollars. I don't see how that violates the equal protection clause. But then again, I know that'll be for another branch to decide.
Well, if you'll entertain further question, there's a case before the Supreme Court now, U.S. v. Scarametti, and it challenges the restrictions on medical care for trans youth in Tennessee. This is a major case. It's moving forward. Why are we precipitously getting ourselves involved, running up legal bills in this spurious attempt to target and marginalize transgender people, which is what is the impact of this bill? Isn't that true?
No, ma'am, that is not true. And I take umbrage at that, because what I do believe this bill says in no uncertain terms, and that everyone will get to vote for in a minute and express their opinion how they feel about this, is that Senate Bill 39 says we're not going to use state taxpayer dollars to pay for transgender surgeries. If you think we should, then vote red. If you think we shouldn't, then vote green. But I don't think this bill says anything more than that, Senator, and to read more into it is probably a fallacy.
If you will further yield.
Yes, ma'am.
You made a comment about judges that seemed dismissive. You're a member of the state bar. You're an esteemed, respected attorney with great legal skills, I might add. And you feel dismissive about, or you appeared to make dismissive remarks about judges that had ruled in a way that might counter the thrust of this bill.
No, Senator, I disagree with your characterization again. You asked me, I don't think you could say that my comments were dismissive by any means. You asked me a question about court cases, and I told you, and equal protection, and I told you that that is decided by the judiciary, by the court, by the judicial branch, not by the legislature, that we've asked them at times not to weigh into legislation. We've asked them not to rule from the bench, legislate from the bench. So I do think that I would want to tread lightly on making a comment about what a judicial session should be, judicial decision should be from the well. I think, if anything, that is kind, not in any way dismissive.
I'm referring to the remark, isn't it true, that you made before I rose and took the floor? The remark that you made in your comments about judges and law cases that appeared dismissive to me. That's not in your answer to me, but in your general remarks as you closed your argument supporting this bill that puts politicians in the doctor's office.
Again, Senator, I don't think that's what I said or did at all. If you're asking me if that's how you felt, I'm not sure how I can disagree with that, which is, again, what goes down to part of, in some ways, tangentially related to this bill. But no, I think that what I said was the judicial branch is separate for a reason. So if you've got a question about equal protection, while I can give you my opinion on it, I think that would ultimately be decided by a court.
Are you familiar with the nationally respected medical organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and every other leading U.S. medical professional association asserts that that not only does this type of restriction on health care ban medically necessary care for transgender people, but it allows the state, it allows the government, this powerful governmental authority, to interfere with people's medical decisions that they make with their doctor to obtain medical care that they and their doctor agree is needed and warranted for the conditions that they present with.
So, Senator, if they've released an opinion that said they feel that Georgia taxpayer dollars should be used for this procedure, I am not aware of that. But if they have issued that decision, I still would disagree with it. I also don't think that they would weigh into that. Again, this is about whether or not Georgia taxpayer dollars should be used for these procedures. And to take it anywhere else is simply to throw a red herring into the argument.
And it's a procedure that's deemed medically necessary by the medical community that treats conditions such as this. Do you agree that a medical condition exists?
I think that's the question that the senator from the 44th answered, and I've already responded to that.
Thank you for entertaining these questions, and
you have no further
history
questions.
will write the text around this. Thank you.
You have no further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I'd urge your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 39.
Recognize the senator from the 53rd to speak to the measure.
Greatly appreciated, Mr. President. Senator from the 19th, I just want to give my enthusiasm for this piece of legislation. I think we're, 14 or 15 days into this legislative session. And in my opinion, this is the most effective and the most beneficial piece of legislation we have passed thus far in this body. I was talking to some folks in Northwest Georgia last night about this issue, and I tell you what, they are red mad that a Republican Attorney General named Chris Carr could sign this consent agreement and allow their taxpayer dollars to fund transgender surgeries, not only on adults, but also on minors. It's a dark time in our state, Mr. President, and I'm just thankful that this Senate body is moving this legislation. You know, my friends in the Democratic side, they always like to talk about reproductive rights. But we're denying people reproduction for eternity if we trans their gender. That's the basic foundation of a society, is the family block. I believe taxpayer dollars ought to be used to promote a society, to grow a sovereignty, not to destroy it by using that money for transgender surgeries. You know, we hear the Attorney General say, keep chopping. Well, I'm tired of chopping children's genitals with taxpayer money. It's like, what a time to be alive. Never would I have thought, entering the fray of politics, that I would ever be standing up here at this well debating whether or not to use taxpayer funds for transgender surgeries. You know, I hope that the House doesn't delay this piece of legislation. And I may have had a little trouble with the motion just a minute ago, but as soon as this bill concludes, I'm going to motion to immediately transfer this piece of legislation over to the House of Representatives, and maybe the speaker over there, who's willing to have transgenders pray over the General Assembly, can get on the job and get this piece of legislation accomplished. Mr. President, I thank you and I thank the senator from the 19th for bringing this legislation. The people of Northwest Georgia are very happy about it. Thank you.
Senator's yielded. Thank you, Senator. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? I know we have two amendments here. Senator from 38, would you like to speak to the measure?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise again today, I think fitting after the senator from the 53rd and those really charged remarks, to ask, what are we doing? Here we are once again going after a vulnerable population. And to borrow from the senator from the 14th, I want to give some breaking news. All of these efforts are not going to erase transgender men, transgender women from our society. And that seems like what this body is trying to do. As I shared in my question, one thing that really stood out to me was the term radical gender ideology. I can imagine back in the day, radical ideology could have been used to refer to my sexuality, could have been used to refer to my marriage. I am a happily married man with 2 beautiful children. And terms like this speaks volumes to communities that feel marginalized, to communities like our trans community that are being told, you don't matter, we don't want you. First, we don't want you playing sports. Now we don't want you on our health benefit plan, even though you or your family members are contributing to our society, contributing to our government. We don't want you. So my message to the trans community, I really think it's important that they hear from us. Once again, you need to know that you matter,
that you are needed in our society. You are important. Up until 1998, the year that I graduated from high school, my sexuality was not legal in this state. And it seems like what we're trying to do is to tell trans people, we don't want you. This is just mean-spirited legislation. This is just wrong. They are doing nothing to anyone. They are just trying to live their lives as they feel they are called to live them. I just truly hope that this will be the end of this legislation of the constant attacks on the trans community. I have in my hand a letter signed by over 200 doctors in less than 24 hours. They're the ones that should be making this decision. But instead, we're telling them, no, we're going to take that power and that responsibility away from you. And all those years that you have put into making wise decisions to ensure the better health of society, we're going to take that away from you. We want to make that decision here in the Senate chamber. Y'all, please stop. We need to stop with this mean-spirited attack on the trans community. Mr. President, I yield.
Senator is yielded. Senator from 36, you wish to speak? Oh, you got a question? Senator from the 14th, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is kind of gross. I mean, it's talking about surgeries over and over again like surgeries are even happening, insisting they're happening. Senator from the 41st had a question about what about hormone therapy, like basic health care for this situation. State employees, 20 years, we breezed right past that. Surgeries. Scare tactics, primaries. This is really gross. And I know you guys feel like you have to do it, but it sucks. It really sucks. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Senator is yielded. All right, we have two amendments that have been presented. I'm going to let the Secretary read the amendments and the authors of those amendments speak to them. I apologize. Amendments have been read. So I recognize the senator from the 6th to speak to Amendment 1. Senator from the 6th to speak to Amendment 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring this amendment, simply says no contract shall be awarded or entered into the Department of Administrative Services or any state agency if such contract was solicited pursuant to a request for proposals that includes consideration of transgender issues as any part of a factor or criterion in the evaluation. And the reason I'm bringing forth this amendment, if we're saying that state dollars should not go towards any type of these procedures, and so I don't think any contracts should be considered on either way, and this really looks at it from both sides. If a company that might do some sort of transgender treatments in any sort, they potentially could be discriminated against in a contract. They could also, on the flip side, if they don't, then that potential is there too. So we're just removing it to say the state's not going to ask you what your stance is on this, and you're going to be treated for the contract and for the RFP, the requirements in that RFP, and that only. And I'm sure I've got some questions on that.
You do have some questions.
All right. I will yield.
I recognize the senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the chairman yield?
I will yield.
Thank you so much. Yes, as you anticipated where I was going to be going, I don't understand what you mean by transgender issues.
if there's been RFPs out that have asked questions around around transgender issues, providing possible scenarios of a transgender youth in a rural area might need some sort of treatment. And in my mind, that question should not be asked in an RFP. And therefore, because it should not matter. It shouldn't matter if a company does that or not, if they provide any type of services towards that or not. So that should not be a criteria that should be in consideration for that RFP, except if there's a mental health, if there's still mental health, they can provide mental health, not towards helping them transition, but just realizing that there is mental health issues involved, and they should be able to treat that, and that they can ask questions around the mental health of that, but not specifically on transgender issues.
But wouldn't what you just said, Mr. Chairman, be a transgender issue that you're saying would be allowed?
Repeat your question, please.
Maybe I misunderstood you, but I thought I heard you to say you don't want proposals sifted through or required to have companies say they're going to do XYZ to help a youth that's transgender, but if it was around a mental health component, that might be all right. Did I misunderstand you?
That is correct, and I have an amendment coming to this amendment.
Okay, right. I would just.
I've been trying to delay so that I could get that prepared.
Yeah, I would say your standard is so vague as to be totally not workable. So I look forward to the amendment. I do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Maybe your amendment will fix this, but the way I read it initially, there are a lot of contracting rules and opportunities, and some federal and some federal law, some state law that classify minority groups in terms of women are a minority vendor, right? A minority business that might be eligible for a certain contract if it's like a woman-owned business.
Correct.
So
I own a veteran-owned business.
If you say transgender issues, to me that's sort of saying like related to sex, and then I don't believe that we could eliminate all consideration of sex as part of these contracts, given the amount of precedent.
Senator, I think you're starting a whole different debate on whether it's a mental issue or a sex issue. I'm simply taking the issue off the table altogether to saying this state is going to consider contracts in the future that are solely based on criteria laid forward, where we're not going to go down this rabbit hole. We're not going to leave this up to judgment. We're not going to leave this up to politics. We're simply going to be, you are either qualified for this RFP under these conditions, taking this one condition. When I say condition, I mean condition of the RFP. We're taking that one issue out of the equation so that it is just straight up. We're just not gonna go down. We're not gonna involve politics in our contracts. That is the purpose of this.
So I want to clarify what I was asking and get your response, and this will be it. Essentially, what I'm saying is that the reason that we're in some of the place that's being described as part of this bill is that courts have held that the term sex does encompass some of these issues that you're discussing, right? I mean, that's how we got here. So therefore, my question is, in saying we will not include consideration of transgender issues, as a lawyer, I read that and I immediately think that's what the term sex has been defined to include, which makes me wonder, have you thought through that this could eliminate disadvantaged women-owned business contracts inadvertently?
No, I don't think this touches
I think we
that
need to
at
think
all.
about
In fairness, I think that's a very fair question, and that is not the intent of this at all.
Yes, I think we got to make sure that that's not wrapped up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fair enough.
Recognize the senator from 37th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentlemen, yield.
Senator 37. It's okay. You get them confused every once in a while.
Your time's coming, Senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the gentleman yield?
I yield.
So just in plain English, what this does, your amendment, it should be adopted, makes it clear that if there's a vendor that does not provide any transgender or sexual reassignment surgery or whatever the term one would use, if they don't provide that in anywhere in their system, they can't be required to demonstrate how they provide that service in a procurement, correct?
That's exactly right. And on the flip side, if they do, they cannot be discluded.
They cannot be disqualified. So if there's a vendor that works in multiple states,
this is an amendment that would help both sides of the issue on a business, just keeping it fair for everyone involved.
Appreciate it.
That is the intent of this amendment.
Thank you for the amendment.
Are you waving? All right.
I recognize
I yield the well.
Senator has yielded. I now recognize the senator from the the senator from the 41st to speak to amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I come before you with a very short amendment that essentially cedes everything else that you've wanted, except it carves out a space for people to be able to receive mental health care. I've served in this body as the co-chair of the Mental Health Caucus for several years. This body has shown its dedication and commitment to mental health care access and treatment. And I think that it's imperative that if we want to care for people who are on our state health benefit plan holistically, we need to make sure that people have access to mental health care. Now, what you might not understand is that the term gender-affirming care, it's a broad term. And for most people, the first step towards gender-affirming care is psychotherapy. And also, if this body really is committed to trying to make sure that children don't transition, I will be clear with you that oftentimes it's in psychotherapy that children learn that they don't need to transition. They're able to work with therapists to talk about their gender dysphoria, to talk about their understanding, and they often come to a place where they don't need to transition. I would argue for the majority party that access to mental health care and being able to talk to a therapist about gender dysphoria, particularly for children, is actually your stopgate. It's your first point where you could prevent someone from a child from actually wanting to transition. So I'm ceding a whole lot here just by asking you to say, like, okay, if this is your goal, if your goal is for people to never transition, if your goal is particularly to make sure that children don't transition, then they need to talk to a therapist, and we need to cover that. This is not a political point that I'm trying to point. This is really about access to mental health care. This is about helping children get the care they need. If you have a son or a daughter who is struggling with their sexuality or their gender identity, I would hope that the first thing that you would do after having conversations in your family and really talking through with your child, I would hope that you would turn to a trained and licensed therapist to talk to your child about that issue. That should be our next step, and we should be able to do that under our state health plan. So again, this is not about politics for me. This is about care for children, about making sure that people have access to that very, very first stopgate, which is talking to a therapist where they might be able to work out some of their issues around gender dysphoria. And some of those kids will say, you know what? You're right. I don't need a transition. And maybe another kid will say, I do. But they need to have a safe, trusted adult who's trained, who's licensed, who can provide that mental health care for them. And so I think that this is a compassionate vote. I think this is the right vote. And I think that, honestly, it aligns with the majority party's aims here if they want to help make sure that children don't actually transition. With that, Mr. President, I will yield for questions.
You do have one question, Senator. Senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, I'll yield.
Okay. Just to be 100% clear, because I actually have not thought about this before, and we have not talked about this. So the child that goes in for counseling, in theory, a child could go in for counseling about gender dysphoria, not knowing what it's called, before they ever identify as trans.
That's right.
Yes, right?
That's correct.
And if the counselor is reporting to insurance, like if they're a licensed provider of mental health care and they're reporting to insurance, they usually have to code it somehow, right? Correct?
That's correct.
And what you're saying is if the counselor sees that the child has a gender dysphoria issue, they would probably have to do a treatment code that would cover that. And under this bill, even if the child is not trans, the state plan would not be able to cover it because that's how the licensed person would have to code the treatment, correct?
That's correct. And I'll break it down a little bit more. So let's say that you have a child who expresses when they, so therapists in the room, if you've been trained in mental health at all, you know there's always a person who comes into the room and they have a presenting issue. But oftentimes, a couple of sessions in, you learn that the presenting issue isn't the actual issue. So if a child comes in with a presenting issue of gender dysphoria, it gets coded as gender dysphoria, and that care would no longer, if we were to not pass this amendment, would no longer be cared for. And as a consequence, the therapist would not be able to work with that child to kind of dig through the things to see what's at the core. Perhaps at the core, the child does have full-on gender dysphoria and they need additional care. That's possible. But for many children, that's just because that's the presenting issue, it doesn't mean it's the end issue. And for many children, through therapy, particularly when they have a trained, good psychologist, that is the point where they can say, you know what, all I needed to do was talk to a therapist who trusted me, and I don't feel the need to go and ask for any additional interventions. Now, and I think that's really important. I think this strongly aligns with the majority party's position. If you want children, that's your concern, you don't want children to transition, the place where that can be stopped and the children get the help that they need so that we don't have the negative outcomes that I'm always standing up here talking about, right? Children who are trans are more likely to die by suicide. They're more likely to self-harm. If we want to stop those things, those children need to have access to mental health. And I want to be clear with you, I'm not talking about mental health that automatically, therefore, the counselor leads them to the place that they must transition and have medical or surgical interventions. I'm talking about a therapist who simply sits down with your child that you love and you care about and talks with them through their issues and holds their hand and guides them as they sort through what it is that makes them feel like they are foreign in their body and helps them work that stuff out to the place where they can get to a point where they say, you know what, Mom and Dad, I think I'm okay. Or at least I can live in the body that I have right now while I grow up a little bit further. That's what good therapists can do with children who are just on the edge, who are just beginning to explore, whose presenting issue is gender dysphoria, but ultimately when you dig deeper, it's something else.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, no further questions, Senator.
I have no more.
No more.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I yield. And I ask that you all would favorably consider this amendment. This is not a big amendment. It's very small. It simply allows children, especially, but all adults, to have access to mental health care, a point that I think that this entire body can agree to. With that, I yield the well.
Senator's yielded. Senator from the 6th, what purpose do you rise? You want to speak at the front? Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I realize my amendment brings forth a lot of questions, and I was trying to get an amendment to that amendment, and can't get the wording the way I want it, and therefore I do think this is an important piece of legislation, and I do not want to hold it up, and I don't want my amendment or amendments to confuse debate. Therefore, I'm withdrawing Amendment 1. Thank you. I yield the well.
Senator, you need to request that from your desk, so. I recognize the senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I withdraw Amendment 1.
Senator has withdrawn amendment number 1. Is there objection to that? No objection. Amendment 1 is withdrawn. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against either the underlying bill or the amendment? If not, we will have the minority report, and then we'll have the author close debate after the minority report. So I recognize the senator from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. So to close out is what we already know, and at the basis, this is just a mean bill targeting a very vulnerable group of people. I'm not here to talk about whether gender affirming care is valid, whether transgender identity is valid, because frankly, I know this body would never reach an agreement. It's an ideology fight. But it's a mean bill. I liken it to, we've seen the tropes, the bullies in high school, the good-looking kids with all the money and power. And that awkward kid walks down the hall, just a little different, just a little strange. Probably not the strongest. But that bully is targeting them every time. And a lot of times they can't fight back. This is what this bill feels like to me. And we're using the power of the state, of those that are in the majority, using the power of the state to pick on a vulnerable group of kids because you got the power to do it. And just because you have the power to do it doesn't mean it's always right. It's a mean bill. It's mean. I think it's a low position for this body. And, you know, the senator from the 19th keeps saying, hey, it's a bill so that we're not using taxpayer dollars on gender affirming care. But I also want to point out that this body is not spending state taxpayer dollars on expanding health care for non-trans, for the over 500,000 people who do need health care. We're not spending money on that, but we want to deal with, we're protecting taxpayers all of a sudden and being good stewards of their money. SB 39 gives the impression that it's protecting minors, but instead it is targeting working adults who work for our state, and it is controlling their medical care decision. The bill at its basis is nothing more than, this is a cheap political stunt aimed at bullying a small population of our constituents. And I'm disappointed that we're spending precious time talking about this and not talking about anything else that constituents care about. My constituents aren't asking for this bill. We should be able to agree on that. We owe it to taxpayers to use their hard-earned funds the right way wisely. Passing unconstitutional legislation that puts our state at a legal economic risk is reckless, is disrespectful to our hardworking taxpayers that help power our state. Y'all keep talking about taxpayer money. We're being good stewards about taxpayer money. I oppose this bill, too, because of very practical problems with this bill that have gone completely unanswered, and ask everyone here to consider the consequences of your vote. If SB 39 is passed, it's going to put into place, what it will put into place, it will cost taxpayers millions of dollars in legal battles and harm our state's reputation within the business community. SB 39 directly violates at least 2 court cases, Rich v. Georgia and Bostick v. Clayton. Bostick makes it clear that employees cannot be treated differently
solely based on their identity. That decision was decided on a 6-3 by the Republican-dominated Supreme Court. And SB 39 seeks to undo a legal settlement, likely already violating the federal constitutional contracts clause that costs taxpayers millions of dollars in lawsuits. Our own Attorney General made the call to settle Rich v. Georgia because under his expert opinion, he knew that this would be a fight that the state could not win. On the other side, businesses and government agencies, they just simply want to hire the best employees and incentivize them to stay. SB 39 would make that harder, both directly and indirectly. At a time when we right now have a workforce shortage, and given some of the short-sighted policies of the Trump administration, we're probably going to face some more workforce shortages. We're going to be driving workers away from our government agencies and schools, making the servicing of our constituents even worse for no reason, because we're going to cause more shortages. Good people could leave this state, and our employers, in order to go somewhere where they don't have to deal with any of this. How does making it harder to run our schools, hospitals, and state agencies serve the people we represent? It's going to allow you that are going to vote for this bill to go back and brag to your districts that, hey, you may not have access to health care or an affordable home, probably can't afford those price of eggs right now, but we sure did get on that gender affirming bill for you. And let's be clear again, this bill is not about policy. It's about political posturing. And I wouldn't vote for anybody that was okay with this level of mean and heartlessness. This is at the expense of people's real lives, people who need health care. And the bill is telling you this is health care. It is. I believe it's on line 44 of the bill. It's health care. Health care that people need to live. It does nothing to improve health care, strengthen our workforce, or protects taxpayer dollars. And instead, again, it singles out a group of people who are very vulnerable so that you all that are going to vote in favor of this bill can have some political points. I urge my colleagues to rise above this divisive legislation. We're elected to serve Georgians, to do good work here. I fail to see how this is good work. And we're elected to serve all Georgians, all of them, even those different from you, those that you're attacking right now, who can't defend themselves. It is our job to serve all Georgians and protect them regardless of who they are, what they believe, who they love, and how they choose to live their life. And I'm disappointed that we're spending precious time even talking about this. And I know some of y'all are going to sit here and argue, oh, well, we can do all of it. We can deal with this and deal with other stuff. So let's start dealing with the other stuff. Because right now I have constituents that can't even find an affordable place to live. I have kids that don't have a place to live. I have people that don't have health care. Let's start dealing with that stuff. Again, we could be using our time doing better things, but this is what we're going to deal with. And I want us to start dealing with things that actually help our constituents. Mr. President, with that, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded. Recognize the senator for the 19th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the Senate for the debate on this issue. The question still is just as clear as it was when I came up here the first time. Do you think state taxpayer dollars should be used for gender-affirming care, including transgender surgeries? If you think yes, that should be, then you should vote against this bill. If you think state taxpayer dollars should not be used for such surgeries and care, then you should vote for this bill. It's that simple. There have been a lot of amendments, and I know the water got very muddy, and I appreciate those who withdrew their amendments and tried to clear it up, because it really is no simpler than what I've already put to you. On Amendment 2, appreciate the senator from the 41st Amendment 2. I think, though, that her examples that she gave are already covered in this bill. Look at lines 45. That's when you're talking about the items that are no longer allowed to be covered, we say that gender-affirming care means health care such as hormone therapy, sex reassignment surgeries, in an attempt to affirm an individual's perception that is inconsistent with the individual's sex. All of the examples given were consistent, were someone trying to get mental health care that was consistent with said individual's sex. Those would still be allowed to be covered. The only thing that would not be covered is those that were inconsistent. So the suggestion or the premises put forward by Amendment 2, I think, are already covered in this bill. I would ask that we keep the water clean like we did with Amendment 1, and that we just would vote down both to go forward with the bill. One last time, in case it hasn't been clear enough already, the only question in this bill is whether or not state taxpayer dollars should be used for gender-affirming care and transgender surgeries. If you think they should be, you should vote against this bill. If you think they should not be, then you should vote for this bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
The Senator has closed debate. We're now in the posture of taking up Amendment number 2, authored by the Senator from the 41st. Although, is there objection to Amendment number 2? There is objection from the Majority Leader. All those in favor of Amendment 2 will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the adoption of Amendment 2, the yeas are 19 and the nays are 33, and this motion has failed. Senator from the 14th, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I rise to make a motion to reconsider the Senate's action on Amendment 2 for the purpose of doing the very normal legislative activity of clarifying the statute so there's no ambiguity for the state health benefit plan about what they are or are not covering. Mr. President.
Motion is in order on considering Amendment number 2. So his motion is in order. Is there objection to his motion? Object. There is objection to his motion. All those in favor of the Senator from the 14th motion will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock machine. On the motion to reconsider, the yeas are 19 and the nays are 33, and this motion has failed. We are now in the posture of voting on the underlying question of the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 53rd, you have your light on. For what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I'll just wait till after the vote.
On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 33 and the nays are 19. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Recognize the senator from the 53rd. For what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate immediately transmit Senate Bill 39 as passed to the House of Representatives.
The senator has made a motion to immediately have Senate Bill 39 transmitted to the House. That requires 2/3 vote. Is there objection to the? Have objection? Very forceful objection. All right. Senator has made a motion. Like I said, it requires 2/3 vote. All those in favor of the motion will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Secretary just informed me to make it clear it's 2/3 of the members here in the body. Senator from the 29th, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry,
State
Mr.
your
President.
inquiry.
Mr. President, isn't it true that we would need 2/3 on this, just like we would to call a special session?
Senator knows what he speaks.
Thank you.
On the motion for immediate transmittal, the yeas are 32, nays are 18, and that motion fails. Senator from the 53rd, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I motion to reconsider.
Is there objection to the senator's motion? The senator from the senator from the 53rd is asked for reconsideration on his motion, which puts us in the same posture that we were just in. Majority Leader, we're going to consider his motion again, but I think you have a motion that we'll go ahead and put on deck here as soon as we're done with this. Motion to adjourn. Yeah.
You ready for a motion, sir?
All right. So we're going to, in the posture of reconsideration on the senator from 53rd, there is no reconsideration, but he is eligible to make another motion, and it is the same motion. Is there objection to the senator from the 53rd's motion? There is objection. All those in favor of the senator from the 53rd motion will, hold on one second. Senator from the 18th. Senator from the 18th. He's in the Senator from the 18th, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just thought I could help with this parliamentary quagmire we're in by telling everybody I do have lunch in the ante room. I thought that might move things along a little bit, Mr. President.
I do appreciate that. We're almost done. Motion for immediate transmission from the senator from the 53rd. All those in favor of his motion will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 33, the nays are 19, and it does need 2/3 of the members present, and it has not passed. It has failed. So, all right. Now I recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, February the 12th.
The majority leader has moved. Secretary, read the announcements.
Mr. President, the Rules Committee will meet upon adjournment in room 450 in the Capitol. At 1 p.m., the Children and Families Committee will meet in room 307 in the CLOB. At 1 p.m., the Urban Affairs Committee will meet in room 125 in the Capitol. At 2 p.m., the Appropriations, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Subcommittee will meet in MES 1. At 4 p.m., the Regulated Industries and Utilities Committee will meet in room 450 in the Capitol. At 5 p.m., the Education and Youth Committee will meet in room 450 in the Capitol. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the minority leader for announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just announcing that tomorrow will be Kappa Alpha Psi Day Incorporated. Tomorrow we'll be in room 123 from 8:30 to 2:30. So please go by and say hello to the members of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Thank you.
Recognize the senator from the 6th.
Mr. President, I was just going to announce that rules will start at 1, not immediately upon adjournment.
Rules will start at 1 o'clock. The pro tem has lunch for everyone in the ante room. Majority leader has moved that we stand adjourned till 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All those in favor of his motion will signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. Have a good day.